Thank you to Creative Mornings for having me, and happy birthday. And thank you to 21C for hosting. I feel very honored to be here, and I'm very proud to have my work exhibited at 21C. Both Creative Mornings and 21C are really wonderful things that Lexington is lucky to have. Okay, so anxiety. So I started thinking when I was asked to give this talk about what kind of anxieties I live with. I recently quit my day job, and I'm now a full-time artist, and I first kind of thought it would be like this video that Britney Spears posted on Instagram. I don't know if you guys seen this. Just like hanging out on a terrace in your activewear, like painting a painting. And that painting actually sold for $10,000. But it turns out that being a full-time artist is nothing like that. This is my studio in Bushwick in Brooklyn. It's about 100 square feet, and it has no windows, and it costs more than my rent was in Lexington when I lived here. So paying that rent on top of my apartment rent gives me a slight dose of daily anxiety. Talking in front of a large group about my work gives me slight anxiety. But you guys are all here, I'm guessing, because you also have this creative need. You have to comprehend and process the world through creating this language that you get to make up, which is pretty awesome and slightly terrifying. But you know about these anxieties associated with being a creative person. So instead, I'm going to share with you 3 series of works that I created in order to work through these feelings of anxiety, mostly associated with the political state of our country. Because creative person or not, if you've been tuned into the news at all the past few years, no matter what your political stance may be, you've likely felt this national, maybe global feeling of anxiety. So all the work I'm showing you today stems from quilting and sewing skills that I learned from this woman right here. Her name's Geneva Eisen. She's my grandmother. She is from Kingdom Come Creek in Whitesburg, Kentucky. And this is a quilt we made together that won first prize at the Letcher County Homemakers Club. As Celeste said, I got my MFA here at UK, where I was making completely different work than what I'm going to show you today. I was working mostly in video and traveling a lot to Eastern Kentucky to film video portraits of women from the region for a collection of portraits that I called Home Place. So they're short little video portraits of women ages 5 to 85, 85 being my grandmother at the time. So I moved to New York after graduate school and started working in film and television. And I was editing a film, and you have to stare at a computer a lot when you are doing video editing. And films take forever. So I started really craving using my hands and making something and finishing something. So my grandmother had this quilt that she had started but hadn't finished. So I picked it up and I just started quilting, not really for my art, but for just to kind of get my hands dirty. So this was in late 2014 when the media was revving up for an election cycle, and there were numerous tragic acts of gun violence happening. And I was watching and listening to a lot of that coverage while I was quilting. And I came home to Kentucky for the holidays and was at a friend's place that had this wall of antique handguns. And after living in New York and kind of consuming all of this news stuff about gun violence, it felt very strange. And I was like, well, okay, I've picked up this quilting again. I wonder what a wall of stuffed pillow guns would look like. So I started making some, using very colorful fabrics and kind of learning about different kinds of guns. And it seemed like there were so many shootings happening, and the news cycle was on this repeat of who's to blame? Should we change the laws? Should we ban guns? Should we ban this bum stock thing? Should we, hashtag thoughts and prayers would flood the internet, then nothing would happen, and we'd move on, and the cycle would continue. So here's some more very floral, colorful fabrics. So as I'm making these guns somewhat obsessively, this is my couch covered in a and a lot of guns. I'm trying to process, like the rest of the country, why is this happening? So what motivates these men? And I say men because it's mostly where these gun acts were being carried out by men. And I started looking at what else was happening in our society. So we legalized same-sex marriage. People were getting really upset about which bathrooms people were using. We met Caitlyn Jenner. And so my warm guns started to get a little more exaggerated, droopy, maybe impotent. And then I came across this article, America's Gun Problem Has Everything to Do with America's Masculinity Problem. And in this article, this sociologist says, as men doubt their ability to provide, their desire to protect becomes all the more important. They see carrying a gun as a masculine duty. So, one of the magical things about making art is that there are these intentions that you have when you make the work, and then there is all this context, emotions, opinions, perspectives that the viewers bring to your work. And with this Warm Gun series, I'm using this playful, approachable medium of soft sculpture and turning a familiar to some, scary to others, recognizable object of a gun in hopes of opening a discussion that's been proven pretty difficult to have. So this one right here, it's made, is anyone a quilter here? Anybody quilt? Yeah, this is a, do you know what this pattern is? It's a double wedding band quilt. So you would make one of these for somebody who's getting married. There's all these different quilt tops that have all these different meanings, and a quilt top it's kind of like a sandwich, making a quilt. There's like a top layer where you piece everything together. There's the batting, like the warm part, and then there's a bottom layer, and so stitching through all three is quilting. So this is a quilt top that somebody had put up on eBay, and it hadn't actually quilted. And this one, actually my sister found this one at a yard sale or a thrift store or something. When Jeb Bush was running for president, he tweeted this. It's a Glock with his name engraved in it, and he just said, "America, period." So I made one, Gov Jeb, and then I tweeted it at him, "America." And when I was doing these guns, I was working a job in television, so I didn't have a lot of free time, so I would just sew on the subway. So like the first 100 or so guns that I made, I would make during my commute. So kind of taking advantage of the time that I had. This place might look familiar to some of you. It's just down the street, Institute 193. So they were the first gallery to do a solo show of this gun work. So that was special. This is an Apple Shop, the Apple Shop Gallery. It's in Whitesburg, Kentucky. It's actually in the town where my grandmother, with the quilt, where she's from. And there's actually a quilt in Apple Shop that she helped quilt. So that was pretty cool to have work in the same space as her work. This is from a friend's house in Connecticut. We did kind of a small party gun show. And this is a wall, the entryway of the Affordable Art Fair. So I did this past September. So as you can see, very droopy presentation. The gallery in Queens. And this woman, she's a professor at Carnegie Mellon. She curated this show of all these artists that do work around guns, right? So there's tons of people, tons of artists dealing with this subject matter. So to some people, gun ownership is tied closely to their identity. And when you threaten someone's belief and identity, it can create some serious anxieties, which brings me to my next series that I call Alt Caps. So in December of 2016, a friend sent me a link to an article about my work that I wasn't aware existed. It's called "Feminist Artist Takes on Toxic Masculinity by Making Soft, Impotent Sculptures of Guns." It's on theblaze.com, which is Glenn Beck's website, his news and entertainment website. So people always tell you, don't read the comments. You're not supposed to read the comments about your work. But I did, and they were pretty fun. So this is one. I like this one. Maybe she can bake some gun-shaped pies or cakes. I might be okay with that. Soft and impotent is how Ms. Baxter likes her men, LOL. Somehow I don't think she dates men. Society built on the feminist idea will never exist long enough to be part of mankind's history. This one's pretty intense. I'm sorry, feminists, you were sexually abused as a child and physically abused as an adult. It must be sad living out the remainder of your life bitter, angry, and resentful. So I started turning these into banners and wall hangings, similar to the ones that you might see that were made from suffragettes in the late 1800s, or ones that you might see in tomorrow's Women's March, or last year at the Women's March. This one kind of sums it up for me, like the whole project. Clearly, Natalie Baxter is confused about her role as a woman. All right, what is my role as a woman to like sit home and sew things, or? So I made that into a banner. Democrats just want to be sluts. This chick needs a good railing. Some of them are more playful and fun, like just go burn your bra. Or progs are so silly, progressives are so silly. This libtard is out of her freaking mind. I learned a lot of new words doing this too. That's art. See folks what shrooms and LSD do to the head. Just a man-hating feminazi with no redeemable qualities, not to mention no brain. So these comments are directed at me. They're about my gender, they're about my sexuality and my mental state. However, I have a hard time believing that this anxiety and aggression was all brought on by me making a collection of stuffed pillow guns. But I decided to bring these comments off the screen and into my work because I see these as, sadly, a part of the fabric that makes up the world that we live in. And I feel like instead of shrugging it off or ignoring it, I feel like it's good to bring it out in the open and confront it. So hopefully I'm achieving that. The last series I'm going to show you is from this collection of different versions of the American flag that I call bloated flags. So again, using lots of different colorful fabrics, I started making these. This one's actually an old quilt top pieced together. I started making these the summer of 2016 when the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention were taking place, and it was becoming very apparent that, or at least to me, maybe everybody else already knew or whatever, that our country was very divided and that people were taking Trump seriously as a candidate. So I started thinking about the flag as a symbol after the Charleston shooting, actually. So when the Charleston shooting sparked a debate about the Confederate flag, I started thinking about this symbol that really means something completely different to different groups of people and that changed over time and took on new meaning. So I thought about that in the context of the American flag and what the American flag means to different people. Like to some, it might be a symbol of pride. To some others, shame. To some, it might mean inclusion, or it might be an offensive symbol to some other people. And I was thinking, like, what does it mean to like a Mexican American when at the time this presidential candidate was calling Mexicans criminals and rapists? What does it mean to a Muslim American when Trump bans 7 majority Muslim countries? Or an American woman when we're listening to all this locker room talk. Or a Haitian American, Puerto Rican American, somebody who is a recipient of DACA. So I made this one right after the election. It's called America, Current Mood. And it's like a very big one twisted in a knot. And I started these at a residency in upstate New York in Wassaic, New York. Residencies are they're kind of like adult summer camp. You go and you get to, it's awesome. You're with other artists and you have a little space. And this was actually in a barn, so it's like a pin, like a sheep pen or a stall. So I was making these flags there, and I started to make some gold ones, like you see here. And this woman came to my studio, and she was like, "You need to be careful because people are going to think that you're making a Trump flag." Because, you know, Trump has, apparently his penthouse is all gold in New York, and Trump Tower has that gold text. So I thought that was like a really interesting comment because it shows how divisive that you wouldn't want people to think what like half the country is thinking right now or wants to vote for. So I started making a collection of people will think you're making a Trump flag, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, am I making a Trump flag? What does that mean? And then this one, I made it after Trump was in office for a month. It's got a nice twisted knot. I made a really big one. My friend took a selfie with it. This is a baby for scale. And this one is one that I made for an exhibition last summer, also at Wassaic. It's this giant flag, it's about 17 feet long, and it's cut into 5 parts. And it's kind of based off of this political cartoon that Benjamin Franklin drew. First, he used it to try to unite the colonies for the French Indian War, and then it was kind of adapted for the American Revolution too. So this like snake cut up. One side of the flag is mostly patchwork red and in pinks. The other is mostly blues. And I don't really have a good picture of this, but where they're cut, it's kind of like when you cut a tree, has tree rings, but out of fabric. So severed and growing together, growing apart. Time will tell. This is kind of the guts of it. So of course I was stuffing and sewing till the very last minute because it was a big undertaking. Here's that gold one again in a gallery. And that same one kind of draped over some stuff, so it kind of took on different shapes. This is a gallery in the Lower East Side. And this is again at the Affordable Art Fair. This is their collector's lounge. So that is all I have for you guys today. Hopefully this has inspired you to maybe turn some of your anxieties into some kind of art creation. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you. Yeah. 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 My grandmother, she sadly passed away this past spring, and the last couple of years of her life, she had dementia, but I would show her every time. I'd show her pictures or bring her stuff, and I showed her the pictures of like the men in their underwear. I think she was just like, Lord in mercy. But she liked it. She was like, I can't believe you did all this. But she was someone she kind of obsessively quilted too, and she was kind of like the person that people would bring things to mend or sew on the creek. So yeah, I think she approved. Did I answer your question? Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Oh, wait. Most unique fabric. I would say the quilt tops. They're like, I think one woman was like, I can't believe you're cutting up quilt tops, which does feel kind of sacrilegious a little bit, but most of them have been sitting in someone's attic for so long, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm selling it on eBay for $30. Like, who wants it? But I have one that's like so perfectly, it was hard to cut up that one that my sister gave me because it was really amazing. And I finally held on to it for like a couple of years, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do something with it. So yeah, probably the quilt tops, because so much time goes into that. But maybe I'm giving it a new life. Yeah?
How many guns do you think? And then also, is that something that you kind of put behind you, or do you find yourself going back and doing those sort of throughout while you're doing other stuff?
Yeah. I've probably made I stopped counting at like 150. So I think I probably made like 200 or more. I don't know. I've definitely lost count. But yeah, I still do make some of the gun work. Because I think it goes really well when I show that alt caps work. Sometimes I like to display it with a few guns because it's like, this sparked this. You know, it's like a nice conversation. But also it's not like the gun problem seems to be going away. So I feel like it's kind of might continue. Who knows? But I feel like recently I was like, I think I'm done with flags. Might be done with this. I might be done with the text pieces too. I think it might be time for something new. I kind of have ideas that are cooking, but one thing that I had never done before the gun work, I didn't talk to people about it for a long time. Like sometimes it's good to talk to people like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this idea, but sometimes it kind of taints it. And so there was like 6 months or so, I was living in the basement, like this basement room in Brooklyn with like 5 boys, and I was just making so many guns that were just like piling up everywhere, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like what? Like I had no shows coming up or like nothing. I was just like, am I just gonna move from like apartment to apartment with like a million of these? Like what have I done? But luckily it took off from there. But yeah, so sometimes I think it's good to kind of let stuff cook in your brain before you talk about it.
Are they like permanent exhibitions, or do people buy them, or where are they?
A lot of people have bought them, and then some are, like right now, there's some in Berlin, there's some in upstate New York, there's some in, there's going to be one in New York soon. They're like all over. They've traveled around. Oh, San Francisco. They're out and about, and then sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. So. Yeah. Yeah. I know it's a kind of a crazy year, right? I feel like I listen to the radio a lot, like these like talk radio in there's this show in New York. It's called Brian Lair. I don't know if anybody who listens would know that, but it's like this call-in show that people all around New York, all different types of people call in about like political stuff or New York stuff or whatever. I feel like hearing from other people and also just like communicating with communities like this, where you come together and kind of talk about stuff, kind of quells anxiety. Because sometimes, like when I was listening to too much of that news cycle, of that gun stuff, it messes with you, right? And I feel like the media has gone through this identity crisis over the past year too, where they're figuring out how to not do that, you know? So I guess better, but still like figuring out ways of what you can do as an artist or as a engaged citizen. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help dispel the anxiety. It feeds, right?
Yeah.
So for you, is that process of making something that helps dispel anxiety? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Especially maybe because I'm sewing, and sewing is kind of this like, yeah, and it's like a meditative kind of thing. Yeah, but if I don't like go to the studio for a while, or if I'm like traveling for a bit and I don't get to make something, I definitely get maybe that gives me anxiety, like not working. My husband calls it my art medicine. So he's like, just go to the studio. Yes. I don't have a gallery. This group Uprise Art, I don't know if you guys have ever come across that, but it's kind of like this, it's like a gallery representation, but like loosely. You know what I mean? So like, it's like you're like dating and not married or something. I don't know. But so they sell some of my work, but Uprise Art, and then I have Instagram and all that stuff. Natalie Baxter is my Instagram and Twitter. Yes?
So after you read the comments,
Mm-hmm.
how long did it take for you to go from like, shit, that's being hurtful,
Yeah.
to like, I'm gonna make money out of this?
Yeah.
And second part of that, did you ever, like, before you replied to art, did you ever reply in the comments?
I think I would have had to make an account or something, and I didn't want to associate myself with. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, the people who made these comments will never see this work. Probably. I mean, maybe they would, but I don't think so. But yeah, when I first read them, I was like kind of scared a little bit. I was like, this is freaky. Like some of them, I didn't show these, but some of them were like, you should be dead, you should die, kind of thing. You know, like you should point a gun at yourself. All this stuff. I was like, whoa, it's kind of intense. But then after like 5 minutes, I was like, okay, what can I do with this? And then I went out to a few openings that night, and I think I'd posted something, like one of the comments maybe on the internet, and then on Instagram or something. And then so I ran into a few people who were like, whoa, I saw what happened. And they were like, you got to do something with that. And I was like, yeah, that kind of like reiterated, like, yeah, I do. Like, I should do something with it. Because it was, yeah, what do you do with, what else can you do with comments that are that crazy? Anybody else? Yeah. That's what you sound like my dad, or that's what, the idea of the gun stuff. Yeah, because a few people will. I've seen other kind of fabric-made guns, but I feel like maybe that's another reason kind of why I was like hush about it in the beginning, and once I got a little bit of press, then it's like, well, if somebody else makes fabric guns, then it'll be out there. Like it's known that I was the first one to do it. But I don't really know if you can copyright stuff like that. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Yeah, and well, also there's this thought about context. Like if I sold, those could very much be like on Etsy or like whatever on a website, and they could be seen as like decorative, cute things. But because I'm putting them into this gallery context, they have a whole nother. You approach it differently, right? With hopefully more thought-provoking. Buckman.
Now that you're sort of a public figure as a political artist, consciously brush up on your politics and discourse that you're talking about it now more than ever.
You're saying, did I have to brush up on my politics? Oh. I feel like because I feel like I listen to the news more. I also worked for a big news television organization, so that kind of like I was becoming more tuned in from working there. But then also, I think because I spend a lot of time sewing, I listen to the radio a lot, so I get a lot of these political perspectives. But I don't know if I would even say that I'm a political artist. I think I'm just like responding to the world that is around me that happens to be very politically charged right now. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I am. All right, thank you guys so much. It was great.
Ready to do your giveaway?